All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to take a trip back in time, all the way to the 7th century, to really get a feel for what the world was like right before a man arrived who would, well, change everything. We're exploring the world before the Prophet Muhammad. And this brings us to the big question, right? The one that's fascinated historians for ages. How on earth did a group of people who were basically poor, divided into warring tribes, and living in the middle of a desert, how did they become leaders of the known world in just 25 years?
You know, the key to unlocking that puzzle is a single Arabic word, Seerah. Now, this isn't just a biography. It's so much more. It's the complete life story, the methodology, the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Seerah is basically the roadmap that explains this incredible, world-changing transformation.
So why does the Seerah matter so much? Well, it's really important on two levels. For Muslims, the Quran itself points to the Prophet's life as the ultimate example of how to live. But, for anyone who's just interested in history, no matter your beliefs, the Seerah is the key. It's the primary source for understanding one of the most profound shifts in all of human civilization. Okay, so to really appreciate the light that was about to dawn, we first have to understand the darkness. So let's do a quick tour of the world's major powers back in the 7th century. And honestly, it was a time of serious decay. First up, the Persian Empire. This was a civilization with this incredibly deep, proud history. But by this point, that glory was long gone. The empire was basically rotting from the inside out. You had philosophers like Mazdak preaching that women were just common property, and politically, it was pure chaos. Kings were being overthrown left and right.
Then you had the Romans, or what was left of them. The once great empire had split in two, the West and the Byzantine East. Society was literally built on the backs of slaves. Entire families were torn apart just to pay off debts. And religion? Christianity had splintered into thousands upon thousands of different sects. At the very top, the Pope had more power than any king, making and breaking governments with just his word.
The French philosopher Voltaire just nailed it with this quote. He said the Holy Roman Empire was in no way holy, nor Roman, nor an empire. That pretty much sums up how far it had fallen. It had lost everything that once defined it.
So what about India? This was a land with its own amazing past. You had great emperors like Ashoka who had unified the whole subcontinent. But again, by the 7th century, that was a distant memory. Superstition was everywhere. Travelers wrote about seeing idols in literally every home. Society was completely broken by a rigid caste system, and you had these horrific practices like sati, where a widow was forced to burn herself alive.
Now, in all this global darkness, you might think, well, what about the children of Israel, the Bani Israel? If anyone could have offered some guidance, it should have been them, but they had lost their way too. That pride in being God's chosen people had twisted into arrogance. A love for money and the practice of usury, charging insane interest, had just hardened their hearts. And because of that, they'd lost their global standing, becoming a people distorted both morally and politically.
So you've got this picture, right? A world of failing superpowers and lost hope. And against this bleak backdrop, our focus now shifts to the most unlikely place you could possibly imagine, this isolated, harsh peninsula that up until now was barely a footnote in world history. Arabia.
But why Arabia? What was so special about this place? Well, funnily enough, its isolation was its biggest strength. Because it was mostly desert, no major empire had ever really bothered to conquer it. This meant its language, Arabic, stayed incredibly pure. The people were, in a way, a blank slate. They weren't bogged down by the deep-seated corruption of the older empires, which helps explain why they accepted the new message so incredibly fast. And finally, look at its location. It's smack in the middle of Africa, Europe, and Asia, the perfect launchpad for a message meant for the entire world.
Okay, so we've set the world stage. Now let's zoom in, way in, to the lineage of the man at the heart of it all. And this isn't just some boring family tree. It's a direct connection stretching all the way back through history to a long line of prophets. It all starts with the prophet Abraham and his son Ishmael, who settled in that barren valley of Makkah. Fast forward many generations and you get to their descendant Adnan, whose family stayed right there near the city. Go down the line a bit more, and a man named Nader earns the title Quraysh, which means the one who gathers, because he brought all the scattered clans together and made them a real force. And from the Quraysh, we get to two key figures. Hashim, the Prophet's great-grandfather and a famous leader, and then his son Abdul Muttalib, who is the Prophet's grandfather. And there's this really interesting little story about Abdul Muttalib's name. See, he wasn't born with it. He was born in Medina and was named Sheba.
When his uncle, Mutaleb, brought him to Mecca as a young boy, the people saw them arrive and just assumed the boy was his uncle's new slave. So they started calling him Abdul Muttalib, which means servant of Mutalib. And believe it or not, the nickname stuck for the rest of his life.
So, all the pieces are now in place. You have a world in complete decay. You have this perfect, untouched land ready for a new message. And you have a noble lineage leading right to the family that would welcome a new prophet. The stage is absolutely set for a world-changing event.
And that brings us right back to this number, 25. From the moment the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, declared his mission, it took only 25 years for his message to completely transform Arabia and begin to change the entire world. Just 25 years. Think about that.
That's the powerful contrast at the very heart of this story. You've got a world dominated by these decaying superpowers, drowning in ignorance and superstition, and out of the sands of a forgotten desert, an entirely new era was about to begin.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? In a world full of failing empires, what was it about this one man from this one place that made his story so powerful it would not only outlast them all, but completely alter the course of human history forever?